What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we've got our Week 9 fantasy football running back starts and sits for every single matchup. So make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. And let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We will do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, let's get right into it. Real quick, before getting into our breakdown, a quick word from our partners at PrizePicks, which is our favorite DFS site of choice this NFL and fantasy football season. If you guys aren't familiar with them, do yourself a favor and check them out. In fact, when you sign up right now and use code ADP, you get a 100% deposit match up to $100. And look, we're already doing all this research for fantasy football matchups. So why not take advantage of it and get some profits as well? PrizePicks, well, they allow you to basically do exactly that. They have so many different player prop bets, not only in terms of single stat DFS, but also in terms of fantasy score. And you can combine them any which way you want. Super simple, super easy to use. All you have to do, choose two more players from the board, and then just pick the over-under on their projected fantasy score or on their single stat. Again, pretty much for every single matchup as the week progresses, those options will be updated even more so. And then the great thing is you've got two different options in terms of how you want to bet it, whether it's a flex play, so that way you can miss one of your selections but still win. Obviously, that's the safer choice. Or if you want more bang for your buck, check out the power play, where if you get all your picks correct, well, you win even bigger. So again, check all of that out. Details in the description. And we kick off Week 9 on Thursday night with the Jets at the Colts. And hand up, I did not see the success that the Jets had versus the Bengals this last week coming, especially from their two running backs, primarily Michael Carter, but also you can throw in Ty Johnson as well. And with maybe, the Mike White effect, I don't really even want to call it that, at quarterback. But Ty Johnson has been a little bit more effective. I think he's kind of that flyer that you throw in there in primarily PPR formats. That's where he's been doing his damage. But Michael Carter, let's talk about him because he's kind of transitioned into the guy that we anticipated out of the rookie running back class in terms of being potentially the best value just later on in drafts. And now he's kind of become the primary running back for the Jets, not only on the ground, but also getting a lot of work as a pass catcher. You could argue he is a solid RB2 with some nice upside going forward. And I would go with him here for sure. I would feel good about starting him, honestly, for the rest of the season. For the Colts, Jonathan Taylor, he continues to be the name that you're going to hear. And honestly, playing like a top 5 running back, you continue to put him out there, especially versus the Jets. While Nyheim Hines, kind of a forgotten man, I think for the second week in a row now, I'm saying you sit Hines, in fact, pretty much droppable, I would say. Then Raiders at the Giants. Here, tentatively starting both Josh Jacobs and Kenyan Drake. Jacobs did get a little bit banged up last week, but coming off the bye, hopefully having had some more rest, I think Jacobs is going to be starting here and be all right. He's more of that standard suited guy, like we usually say, Kenyan Drake, that PPR guy. It was nice to see Drake's usage post that first, John Gruden era game. We'll see if that continues, if that's a long-term type of deal, or if it was a one-off. I definitely have more faith in Josh Jacobs, but I think both these guys, you can argue, are in the RB2 conversation. Kenyan Drake probably, in the RB3 if he doesn't get the touchdown. So something to keep in mind. But Jacobs, that standard suited guy. Drake, more so a PPR dart throw. For the Giants, if he plays, we've been saying this for a while, Saquon Barkley. But there's still no timetable with that ankle issue, which is a little bit concerning. So in the meanwhile, you continue to put out Devontae Booker. He is kind of, game-dependent, volume-based type of running back, but he is in the RB2 range. Okay, low-end RB2, but as long as this game isn't out of hand, I don't mind Devontae Booker, all things considered. Moving on, Falcons at the Saints. You start Cordarrelle Patterson, and Patterson, especially now, without Calvin Ridley for I don't know how long, considering he's going to be, stepping away from football. Patterson becomes even more valuable as a pass catcher, which is kind of where he's been making a lot of his successes in, because, a running back that basically is also used as a wide receiver, it's kind of a cheat code. That's why we continue to put Patterson, arguably as a running back or as a wide receiver, depending on the format you're in. But either way, he is somebody that, especially in PPR formats, RB2 range, pretty safe floor as well. So you continue to start him. Then for the Saints, Alvin Kamara. But this one is interesting because Jameis Winston, torn ACL. And that means it could potentially be a situation where, well, first and foremost, we don't really know who the quarterback for the Saints will be. Is it going to be Taysom Hill? If that's the case, it's a little bit concerning because he's probably going to take away carries from Kamara. We saw what that looked like last year, and we could potentially have to kind of push him down some rankings here and look at him maybe as a low-end RB1 or as a high-end RB2. It's going to be something that's very, very interesting moving forward. But, thankfully, the matchup versus the Falcons is a good one where you still feel good about starting Kamara. Then as far as the sits, Mike Davis, I'm sitting him. I still think right now him and Patterson pretty much splitting carries. I don't think he has as high of an upside as Patterson does as a pass catcher, so I'm fading him here. And the Saints do have a pretty good defense, so no thank you. And then for New Orleans, I'm fading Mark Ingram. Yes, I know he was traded to the Saints, but to me, it's still the Kamara show. And if it is Taysom Hill under center, I'm fading Mark Ingram even more so. Afterwards, Bills at the Jags. Normally, I put Moss and Singletary as sits, or usually I give the edge to Moss because of what he can do as a pass catcher and how that translates into PPR options. But here, when you consider the matchup versus the Jaguars, and I think it's a very favorable one, you could make the case that both these guys could have some success. I do say that Moss has the slightly higher ceiling. To some extent, they'll both be touchdown dependent, but because of the matchup in the low-end RB2, high-end RB3 category. Then for Jacksonville, James Robinson getting banged up versus the Seahawks. Didn't finish that game. He's kind of going to be day-to-day, supposedly avoided very serious injury. So that's good, but his status is up in the air. If he plays, I'm starting him. He's right now the guy I feel most confident about on this offense. But if he does not play, I would be fading Carlos Hyde, who would be the next man up. But to me, I think this game could potentially turn into a blowout. And if that's the case, the Jaguars' rushing attack is going to be, one that can't be relied upon. I don't trust Hyde's talent as much as I would Robinson if that's the case. So for that reason, no thank you to Carlos Hyde. So pretty much fading Carlos Hyde either way. Then Browns at the Bengals. Nick Chubb is back. He had a good outing. I think a good first return from his injury, and I would start him here versus the Bengals. That continues to be, the bread and butter for the Browns. Run it. For Cincinnati, go with Joe Mixon. He's been relatively reliable, and I think he's going to continue to be a focal point of this offense. I think both these guys are going to be low-end RB1s on the week. And then as far as the backups here, I'm sitting D'Ernest Johnson. I said it last week. This guy, is he going to have the Kareem Hunt role? No, not really. I mean, he only got a couple of carries. The only reason he had a decent outing is because he had a touchdown. Other than that, nothing all that special. It's Nick Chubb without Kareem Hunt. Johnson is not Kareem Hunt. So it's not a one-for-one replacement, and I think that was pretty evident last week. And then for the Bengals, I'm fading P. Ryan here. I think he's kind of just slotted into the Giovanni Bernard role, and as long as Joe Mixon is healthy, well, P. Ryan doesn't do all that much for me. Afterwards, Patriots at the Panthers. I'll start Damien Harris tentatively, primarily in standard scoring, because the Panthers do have a decent rush defense, and I think that's going to cap kind of the upside here for Harris. But for what it's worth, I could see this being a close game, or if the Patriots win, I could see them pulling away. I don't see the Panthers winning in a blowout or something like that. So in my opinion, it's either a close game or a blowout win for the Patriots, which would favor Damien Harris here one way or the other. But I wouldn't get too cute with it here. I think he's more so of a standard play. For the Panthers, Christian McCaffrey returning to practice, which is nice to see, but still no timetable on his return either. Just kind of listing his name here as a reminder. I anticipate it's going to be Hubbard once again. I think, honestly, he's kind of in that similar Damien Harris role as well, kind of expectation, low-end RB2 on the week. And then I'm sitting Brendan Bolden. I don't think he's going to get enough action in this game for the Patriots. Moving on, Broncos at the Cowboys. I only really like Ezekiel Elliott here, but I will say if Dak Prescott does not play, I would consider starting Melvin Gordon, potentially even Javonte Williams. We obviously know both these guys are touchdown dependent. I say it every single week, and the stats back it up. They're both going to get you around 10 carries for between 50 to 60 yards rushing, and you're praying for the touchdown. That's basically what it is. If there's no touchdown, those are not good fantasy reliable running back numbers. That's why I'm worried about this. But if, Dak doesn't play, I think this game is a lot closer, and the Broncos aren't playing catch up, which means both these guys might have some usage. But if Dak starts, I think this could get ugly, and it can get ugly fast, in which case I would sit both Gordon and Javonte Williams. Then Vikings at the Ravens. I really don't want to start Dalvin Cook. Yes, I know he kind of had a subpar outing, didn't really contribute much as a pass catcher, didn't have a touchdown, but still got some hard-fought yards in that loss versus the Cowboys last week. And you continue to start him as long as he's healthy. For the Ravens, Latavius Murray does a return from his injury. I think Devonta Freeman is kind of that next guy up, but I don't love either one of these guys. I think they're more so matchup based. Lamar Jackson is primarily the main guy that I'm looking at as a rusher here that's going to contribute in that type of way, because the Ravens have been doing a lot more passing this season as well. So obviously Marquise Brown, Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews, keep an eye out for those guys, but the running backs here, I think they're all kind of past their prime, so I am fading him here for the Ravens. Afterwards, Texans at the Dolphins. I'll take a chance on Myles Gaskin because I think this is a good matchup, and he can have some success, primarily looking at him to salvage some performances via what he can do as a pass catcher. But again, I don't love it here. He's been very inconsistent on the year, 1 week off, 1 week on type of deal. So I would say just be prepared for worst case scenario, like an RB3 type of performance. But because of the matchup, you take a chance on him. And then for the Texans, I still think David Johnson should be rostered, but man, oh man, after Mark Ingram left and the type of usage that Johnson got, really all those running backs got, was very disappointing to see. Now, I will say it was versus the Rams, so keep that in mind. This is a much easier matchup, so I wouldn't be shocked if one of these guys actually has a relatively decent outing, but because this is, really going to be maybe that first decent test of what the Texans do versus an opponent that isn't leaps and bounds better than they are, I still don't have one way or the other a certainty as to which running back to start. So I would give it one more week and then kind of go from there. So for that reason, Johnson and Lindsey still sits for me. And then Chargers at the Eagles. Austin Ekeler, what else can you say? The guy is a must start every single week. Standard PPR, cheat code, awesome. Love to see it. Let's move on. Eagles. So Miles Sanders hurt, and the Eagles proceeded to be one of the biggest headaches when it came to utilizing running backs. Now, considering they put up 40 plus on the Detroit Lions, you would have thought that Kenneth Gainwell would have been a guy that would have been heavily involved. No. That was not the case. It was the Boston Scott and Jordan Howard show. And here, for what it's worth, the Chargers are a defense that can be exploited versus the run. But I will say this. I think Jordan Howard got a lot of work because it was versus the Lions, because it was a blowout. Boston Scott was that primary guy here, so that's what I'm looking at again. As long as Miles Sanders is out, I'm looking at Boston Scott. I don't think Kenneth Gainwell is just going to flip a switch and do a complete 180 from what we saw this last week versus the Lions. So I don't see the usage going, completely in another direction. So for that reason, I'm sitting Howard and Gainwell. Then Packers at the Chiefs. I'll start Aaron Jones. That's pretty simple there. He continues to be one of the most integral part to this Packers offense. For the Chiefs, Darrell Williams, I'm not all that scared by this Packers defense. I'll ride with Williams to see what happens until Clyde Edwards comes back. But I think, low-end RB2, especially with some of the ways that the Chiefs are struggling offensively. And then A.J. Dillon, I'm sitting him here. I would start him if it was a situation where, literally all the Packers wide receivers were banged up, so Jones had to be used mainly as a pass catcher, and then Dillon could lead that backfield, like was the case last week. But unless that happens again, which I don't anticipate in Week 9, I would sit A.J. Dillon, just too dependent on those big plays and doesn't get enough use as a pass catcher. Next up, we've got the Cardinals at the 49ers, and here I'll start Chase Edmonds and James Conner, and I think this is kind of similar to the situation with the Raiders. You've got your Josh Jacobs type, and then you have got your Kenyan Drake type here. Obviously, James Conner and Chase Edmonds being the two examples. I think they're in the RB2 range. Conner, the more standard-suited guy. Chase Edmonds, the more PPR-suited guy. But by far, the running back that I want to start here is Elijah Mitchell. He has been the guy since coming back from his injury that has been getting the bulk of the usage. Now, it'll be curious to see when some of these other more veteran running backs for the 49ers return, what happens there, whether it continues to be the Elijah Mitchell show. But until then, you continue to fire him up as a high-end RB2. Afterwards, Titans at the Rams. This is a tough one. Not for the Rams. You start Darrell Henderson. That is easy. The guy is a probably low-end RB1 on the week. Love to see it. For the Titans, this is where it gets tough. Derrick Henry gets banged up, going to be out between 6 and 10 weeks, potentially the entire season. So it's a situation where you have to decide, what do you do? Adrian Peterson was signed by the Tennessee Titans. Do you start him in the first game after really being out for them really all season versus the Rams? Probably not. And then Jeremy McNichols, is he going to be utilized enough now that Adrian Peterson was brought in? Or was he mainly a guy that was, utilized the 1 week where he had a lot of success because all those Titans pass catchers were absent? Probably more so. And again, because it's versus the Rams, I kind of want to just sit this one out from the Tennessee side of things, give it a week, see how it shakes up, and then, have a decision as far as fantasy running back starts are concerned. And then Bears at the Steelers. You start Khalil Herbert. I mean, the guy has made people forget about Damien Williams to the extent where, you could potentially have an argument about a running back by committee once David Montgomery returns. That's how well Herbert has played. And yes, it's a tough matchup. But when the guy is getting like 20 plus carries a game and he looks good doing it, I really don't mind it. Maybe a little bit more standard suited, but doesn't matter. I'd take a shot on Khalil Herbert here. And then for the Steelers, Najee Harris, slam dunk as a pass catcher and also as a rusher. I think he's going to be a low-end RB1 on the week. And then Damian Williams, obviously, a sit with how Khalil Herbert has played. But with that, we wrap up our Week 9 fantasy running back starts and sits for every single matchup. And as always, let us hear it in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We will do our best to answer them all. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a like, hit that subscribe button, and again, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. And in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.